Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be tackling something pretty heavy today.
Yeah.
Um, the situation in Gaza,
hmm
it's been in the news a lot lately, and it seems like there's just so many strong opinions out
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
But we're going to try to kind of like cut through the noise a little bit today and really try to understand what's going on
Right.
beyond just like the headlines and the kind of the surface level stuff.
Yeah, the nuances are really important in this one, that's for sure.
Exactly. And so for this deep dive, we're going to be focusing specifically on Candace Owens' take on the situation.
Okay.
We've got a YouTube video of her commentary. And, for those of you who might not know, Candace Owens has been a pretty vocal supporter of Donald Trump in the past.
hmm
So her current stance on this is, well, let's just say it's pretty surprising.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, she's really come out strongly against Trump's plan to relocate Palestinians from Gaza.
Hmm.
She actually calls it a devilish plan and even compares it to ethnic cleansing.
Wow, that is strong language, especially coming from someone who's been so aligned with Trump's ideology in the
Yeah,
past.
right. It makes you wonder what exactly prompted this change of heart from her.
Yeah, for sure.
She does mention a meeting that took place between Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu.
hmm
And she brings up some allegations that Netanyahu had actually talked about making Gaza uninhabitable even before the events of October 7th.
Huh. That adds another layer to this whole thing.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it suggests there might have been some, like, pre-existing intentions to displace the Palestinian population, which, obviously raises a whole bunch of ethical and legal questions.
Absolutely. And it gets even more complicated when she starts talking about Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law.
Oh, okay.
Owens suggests that he might have like a vested interest in the real estate value of the Gaza Strip,
Oh, wow.
even hinting at like pre-existing investments and properties there.
If that's true, that really makes you question the motivations behind this whole plan. Is it really about humanitarian aid, or is there something else going on, something a little more self-serving?
Right. It's a bit unsettling to think that personal financial gain could be influencing decisions that impact the lives of so many people.
Absolutely. It really makes you question whose interests are actually being prioritized here.
Exactly. And this whole idea of emotional engineering that Owens talks about, that's pretty disturbing too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, she's basically accusing Trump and his supporters of using language and framing to manipulate public opinion,
Oh, I see.
to justify actions that might otherwise be seen as, well, morally wrong.
Oh, that's a powerful concept, isn't it? The idea that words can be used to kind of like twist the narrative and make something that's really harmful seem acceptable.
It is, and it makes me think about how the media portrays certain events and how easily people can be swayed by a carefully crafted story.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we need to be critical thinkers, especially when it comes to these complex global situations. We can't just accept everything we hear at face value.
Definitely, and Owen specifically points to the language used to justify relocating the Palestinians, this whole claim that there's nothing left in Gaza.
Hmm.
It's almost like they're trying to make it seem like they're doing the Palestinians a favor by displacing them.
It's a classic tactic, right? You portray the situation as hopeless, the relocation is the only option, and suddenly you've bypassed the whole ethical dilemma of uprooting an entire population from their homeland.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to make people feel sorry for the Palestinians while simultaneously stripping them of their rights and their homes.
It's very manipulative.
It is, and it's especially effective when you consider the historical context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This region has been plagued by land disputes and displacement for decades.
Yeah,
So this plan is kind of like pouring fuel on an already raging fire.
I see what you mean.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Owens actually criticizes the far right for their stance on immigration,
Okay.
but at the same time, she's supporting the displacement of Palestinians.
That seems contradictory.
Right, it does, and that's exactly the point she's trying to make. She argues that by displacing Palestinians and expanding their borders, Israel's actions are actually contributing to the very immigration patterns that many on the far right oppose.
Oh, I see. So it's like she's saying you can't be against immigration and then turn around and support a plan that could potentially force even more people to migrate.
That's exactly it, and it's a pretty bold statement coming from someone who used to be firmly in that camp.
It is. It really highlights how complex this whole issue is.
It does, and it forces us to confront the inconsistencies in our own thinking. Like, are we truly committed to our principles, or are we just picking and choosing which ones to apply based on our own biases?
That's a tough question.
It is, but it's one that we need to be asking ourselves.
I agree.
And instead of supporting the relocation, Owens actually proposes something completely different.
Oh, really? What's that?
She says we should be rebuilding Gaza with the Palestinians remaining in their homeland.
Huh. That's a pretty radical departure from the current plan.
It is, and it would obviously be a massive undertaking.
Yeah, no kidding.
But Owens frames it as a moral obligation, a matter of justice and human dignity.
I mean, she has a point, doesn't she? You can't just displace an entire population because it's convenient.
Exactly. She's calling for a solution that actually acknowledges the rights of the Palestinian people, their right to self-determination, their right to live in peace and security in their own land.
It's a powerful message.
And it brings us to another really disturbing point that Owens raises: the discrepancy between the reported death toll in Gaza and the number of people Trump's plan aims to relocate.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. What exactly is she saying about that?
Well, the reported death toll is somewhere around 20,000, but the relocation plan involves moving 1.7 to 1.8 million people.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is, and if you consider that the population of Gaza before October 7th was estimated to be between 2.1 and 2.3 million, the potential death toll could be significantly higher than what's being reported.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is, and it makes you wonder if there's an attempt to downplay the true scale of the tragedy.
Right, or maybe it's just a matter of the fog of war, where accurate information is hard to come by.
Yeah, maybe, but either way, it's a stark reminder of the human cost of this conflict and the importance of verifying information.
Absolutely, we can't just take official statements at face value, especially in situations like this where there are so many competing narratives and agendas at play.
I agree, and it makes Owen's decision to speak out against the plan even more significant. She's risking her reputation, her relationships, all to bring these issues to light.
Yeah, it takes courage to stand up to powerful people like Trump and challenge the dominant narrative.
It does, and it's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to speak out against injustice, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might cost us something.
I couldn't agree more.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, and it's clear that Candace Owens' perspective on this is far more complex than what we usually see in the headlines.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about here.
There is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, so there's more.
There's much more to explore, so we'll continue our deep dive in the next part of this episode.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we were talking about these death toll discrepancies, and it's like, you hear those numbers, but it's hard to really grasp what that means for real people,
Right, absolutely. It's easy to get lost in the statistics.
Yeah, exactly. And Owens really drives that point home. She talks about the human cost of all of this. And it's more than just numbers. It's about families. It's about lives being uprooted,
Yeah, like she really paints a picture of what that displacement actually looks like. People fleeing their homes with basically nothing.
Exactly. She talks about people walking for days, not knowing where they're going, what's going to happen to them.
It's a reminder that these conflicts, they create waves of refugees.
Yeah.
It's forced migration on a massive scale.
And it's not even just like the physical displacement, right? It's the loss of their culture, their community.
Everything they know.
Yeah, like everything familiar is just gone.
It really makes you appreciate, the stability and security that we often take for granted.
It does, doesn't it? It's like we can't even imagine having to go through something like that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to even think about.
It is. And, one thing I appreciate about Owens is that she doesn't shy away from criticizing both sides of the political spectrum on this.
Yeah, how so?
Well, she calls out the hypocrisy of the far right on immigration.
Right.
But she also points a finger at those on the left who might be overlooking some of the complexities of the situation,
Yeah, she doesn't seem to be afraid to ruffle some feathers.
No, not at all. She's willing to call out problems wherever she sees them.
I think that's what makes her commentary so interesting,
Yeah.
It's that intellectual honesty. She's not just towing a party line.
Exactly. So we've talked about the proposed plan, the motives behind it, the ethical implications, the human cost.
Right.
But what does Candace Owens actually suggest we do instead? Like, what's her alternative?
Well, she proposes something pretty different for the relocation plan. She argues that Gaza should be rebuilt, but with the Palestinians remaining in their homeland.
So rebuilding Gaza, but without uprooting the people who live there.
Exactly.
I mean, that seems incredibly difficult given the current situation.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a huge undertaking, no question.
Like, how could that even work?
Well, it would require a level of international cooperation and financial investment that, honestly, we haven't seen before in this conflict.
So it's not just like a simple solution. This is a long-term commitment she's talking about.
Right. It's a huge commitment, but Owens is framing it as a moral obligation,
Okay.
like it's a matter of justice and human dignity.
So she's not just saying like, oh, this would be a nice thing to do. She's saying we have a duty to do this.
Right. She's arguing that we can't just displace an entire population because it's easier or more convenient.
It's like a whole different way of thinking about this conflict,
It is. It's moving away from this cycle of violence and displacement and trying to create something more sustainable.
And more humane.
Exactly.
It's a bold vision. It's hard to say if it's even possible given the current political climate, but I think her point is that we need to at least try, right?
Yeah, like we need to start thinking differently about this, start envisioning solutions that actually prioritize the needs and rights of everyone involved.
Definitely. And, she also keeps coming back to this point about the potential death toll in Gaza.
Hmm.
You mentioned it earlier, but I think it's worth kind of diving a little deeper.
Absolutely. It's a crucial point.
So she points out this massive discrepancy between the reported death toll and the number of people Trump's plan wants to relocate.
Right.
She suggests that the actual number of casualties could be, significantly higher.
Yeah, potentially hundreds of thousands more than that reported 20,000.
Yeah. It's a horrifying thought, and it really makes you question the information that's coming out of Gaza.
It does. It makes you wonder if there's a deliberate attempt to minimize the scale of the tragedy.
Or maybe it's just, the fog of war, like you were saying, where it's hard to get accurate information.
That's possible too, but either way, it really highlights the importance of independent verification.
Yeah.
We can't just blindly trust official statements, especially in situations like this.
It makes you think about Owen's decision to speak out, she's risking a lot to bring these issues to light.
Oh, absolutely. She's potentially alienating her own supporters.
Right. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does. It shows a real commitment to truth and justice.
It's like she's saying, look, I used to support this guy, but what's happening here is wrong, and I can't stay silent.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. It's really inspiring, in a world where it seems like everyone's just looking out for themselves, she's actually taking a stand for what she believes in.
It's a good reminder that we all have that responsibility,
Yeah.
to speak out against injustice, even when it's hard, even when it might cost something.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, though,
Oh, yeah.
What can one person really do to make a difference in a situation like this?
That's a question a lot of people struggle with, I think. But Owens argues that even small acts of kindness and solidarity can have an impact.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, for starters, we can support organizations that are working on the ground,
Okay.
providing humanitarian aid to people who have been affected by the conflict.
Right, like donating to charities.
Yeah, exactly. There are groups providing food, shelter, medical care to families that have been displaced.
And there are also organizations working to promote peace and reconciliation.
Right. Supporting those efforts is crucial.
And those are all things that anyone can do,
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a huge financial contribution. Even just raising awareness among your friends and family can make a difference.
And she also talks about the importance of people of faith uniting against this,
Yeah, she specifically calls on Christian and Muslims to come together.
It's like she's saying, look, this isn't about choosing sides. It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
And standing up for what's right, regardless of our differences.
It's a powerful message.
It is. It reminds us that we're all connected and that we have a responsibility to create a better world for everyone.
This has been a really intense conversation so far.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
Owens has connected this situation in Gaza to so many other things, like immigration, media manipulation, even our own individual responsibility to speak out against injustice.
It's been really thought-provoking.
It has, and I'm sure our listeners have a lot to think about too.
Absolutely.
But we're not done yet. There's more to explore in Owens' commentary.
Oh, okay.
So we'll continue our deep dive in the next part of this episode. Stay tuned. All right, so picking up where we left off, Owen's perspective on Gaza has been, pretty eye-opening, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's been quite a deep dive for sure.
We covered so much from Trump's relocation plan to the media's role, and even how all of this ties back to us, our own responsibility.
It's been a lot to process, that's for sure.
One thing that stood out to me was how she connects everything, like immigration, global power dynamics. She's basically saying you can't ignore what's happening over there.
She really pushes the point that these issues are all interconnected.
Exactly. And she doesn't let us off easy when it comes to our own role either.
Right. She challenges us to be more than just passive observers.
It's not just about pointing fingers at politicians. It's about, a collective awakening, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, she's really calling for a shift in consciousness, a recognition of our shared humanity, and the need for action.
I remember that part where she compares the situation in Gaza to the end of times. It's kind of dramatic, but you can feel the urgency in her voice.
It definitely underscores the moral imperative she sees in this situation, the need to choose a side, so to speak.
But she's not talking about choosing sides in the traditional political sense, is she?
No, it's more about choosing compassion over indifference, justice over oppression, ultimately hope over despair.
So where do we go from here? How do we turn those choices into action? She talks about small acts of kindness making a difference. What would that look like?
Well, it could be as simple as educating ourselves, going beyond the headlines to really understand the complexities of the situation.
Okay, that makes sense.
We can support organizations doing humanitarian work, those working to promote peace, even just having conversations with friends and family, raising awareness.
Right, spreading the word, getting people talking, even if you can't donate a lot of money, just having those conversations can make a difference.
Absolutely, because those conversations can lead to change, to action.
Owens also appeals to people of faith, specifically Christians and Muslims, to come together on this.
It's a powerful call for unity, a recognition that we have a shared responsibility to stand up against injustice, regardless of our differences.
It really brings it back to those core values, doesn't it? Compassion, empathy, justice. Those should transcend political boundaries.
And she's reminding us that we can't separate our politics from our ethics.
This deep dive has been a lot.
It has a lot to take in.
But Owen's perspective has pushed us to think critically, to confront some really hard truths.
And ultimately to consider our own role in making the world a better place.
It's not easy facing these challenges, but there's also this sense of hope.
Yeah, that even small actions can contribute to positive change.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. But this conversation doesn't end here.
Exactly. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep those conversations going.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, every step we take towards a more just and compassionate world matters. 1350.